Hey guys, it's Destiny, and today we're going to be discussing Himeko as she's gotten so many new team members and synergies, even with the newest upcoming character Fugue. Plus, since we do have a free 5-star selector currently, I thought now would be actually the perfect time to give you all a Himeko guide. Before we begin today's video, let me know which character you're the most excited for when it comes to our 2.7 lineup, or even any of the characters that were teased in 3.0 and beyond. And lastly, if you enjoy videos like these, do consider subscribing, leaving a like to support the video, and now let's get straight into it. To start off with today's video, let's begin with Himeko's kit. Himeko is a Fire Erudition character who revolves around gaining charges by enemies becoming weakness broken in order to unleash more frequent follow-up attacks onto them. When it comes to Himeko's skill, she'll deal damage to a main enemy as well as adjacent enemies, with the main target receiving more damage than the adjacents. As for Himeko's ultimate, it'll have a 120 energy cost, and she'll attack all enemies and regenerate 5 extra energy for each enemy defeated with her ultimate. Which this is a great way to gain additional energy that'll assist towards using Himeko's ultimate once again, and can be very nicely utilized when there are multiple small enemies on the field, for example in Pure Fiction. As for Himeko's talent, this is a very crucial part of her kit, as Himeko will gain charges when enemies are weakness broken, and once she has 3 charges, she will unleash a follow-up attack onto all enemies. You will gain 1 charge from weakness breaking an enemy below elite status, and if you weakness break an enemy that is an elite or higher, you will actually gain 3 charges, which means Himeko can immediately use her follow-up attack after any elite status or higher enemy is broken. Something very important to note though is that Himeko's charges unfortunately do not stack the same way Jade stacks are able to stack. And as a result, when playing Himeko, you'll want to strategically plan when to weakness break enemies in order to unleash as many follow-up attacks onto enemies as possible. Himeko's ability to unleash very frequent follow-up attacks makes her a strong option when it comes to dealing with numerous enemies, used alongside follow-up characters, and of course she can even be utilized on break-centric teams as well, which I'll discuss more once we go over Himeko team synergies. As for Himeko's technique, she'll create a dimension that has a 100% base chance to increase the fire damage taken by enemies by 10% for 2 turns. As for Himeko's traces, her first trace, Starfire, allows her to have a 50% chance to burn enemies when attacking them. Her secondary trace, Magma, actually nicely synergizes with this, as now her skill will deal 20% more damage onto enemies inflicted with burn. As for Himeko's final trace, Benchmark, it allows her crit rate to be increased by 15% if her health is at 80% or above. Having good sustainability on a team will allow Himeko to essentially get a free 15% crit rate, which can definitely help out with making building her a bit easier. As for her minor traces, she'll gain 22.4% fire damage, 18% attack, and lastly 10% effect resistance. Lastly, let's actually go over Himeko's Eidolons before moving on to team synergies. With Himeko's first Eidolon, she'll gain a 20% speed increase for 2 turns after unleashing a follow-up attack from her talent. The 20% speed increase will result in about 19 more speed for Himeko, and this can allow Himeko to more comfortably take advantage of attack boots and still get the additional speed from her first Eidolon. Or if you're looking to have your Himeko a bit on the faster side, then once again, this Eidolon can also assist with that as well. As for her secondary Eidolon, she'll deal 15% more damage to enemies that are at or below 50% HP. This is nice for being able to dish out a bit more damage in order to have an easier time finishing enemies. As for her fourth Eidolon, when Himeko's skill breaks an enemy, she'll actually gain an extra point of charge now. This will be very nice in the scenario of Himeko's skill breaking non-elite enemies, as now you'll get 2 charges instead of only 1. Lastly, for Himeko's 6th Eidolon, she'll deal a bit extra damage now with her ultimate, as there will be 2 additional hits, each of which being 40% of the damage inflicted onto a random enemy. Overall, Himeko has very nice potential with her kit, as she can be a very nice option to use, especially when taking advantage of her follow-up attacks as much as possible. Now though, let's go over team synergies to use with Himeko. When it comes to making teams with Himeko, there are a good amount of options you can consider. You can consider Hyper Carry Himeko, Dual TPS Himeko, Super Break Himeko, and so on. Starting off with Hyper Carry Himeko. This is simply using Himeko alongside 2 other supports. Or if you're not using a sustain, then 3 supports to highly amplify Himeko's damage output. When it comes to supports you could take advantage of, this would ultimately come down to which supports your account has. But some nice options can be Himeko with Sunday and Robin alongside a sustain of your choice or another support. Sunday will be able to provide Himeko more energy for her ultimate usage, provide her a huge amount of crit damage as well as 20% crit rate through his talent, increase her damage dealt to enemies, and of course allow her to attack more frequently, which can assist with Himeko unleashing more frequent follow-up attacks onto enemies, as now she'll have more opportunities to break enemies. As for Robin, she'll be able to provide massive attack buffs, further crit damage buffs, damage boosts, advance the entire team by 100% with her ultimate, and much more. For sustain options, most sustains will be useful in some way, whether it's buffs they grant the team or skill point regeneration. You can use Lingsha to help further break fire weak enemies to assist with Himeko unleashing more frequent follow-up attacks, Aventurine for massive shields, follow-up attacks of his own, more skill point regeneration, and so on. You can consider Gallagher, Huohuo for more energy, Bushwin to get more crit rate for Himeko, and much more. You can of course use alternative hypercarry supportive options with Himeko as well, which can include Baranya to advance forward Himeko as well as give her nice buffs, Sparkle for more skill points and crit damage, Ruan Mei for more weakness breaking efficiency, which will now help Himeko break enemies faster to unleash her follow-up attacks sooner, Ping Yun for attack buffs, damage buffs, and energy, Kayla can reduce enemy defenses, Silver Wolf can debuff enemies and implant them with fire weakness, Asta can be a nice free-to-play option for the speed she grants the team, attack, and she'll also increase the team's fire damage. And overall, as you guys can see, there are quite a lot of options you can consider for your supports on a hypercarry Himeko team. Once again, it just comes down to which supports you have on your account. As for dual DPS Himeko teams though, he can synergize very nicely with other follow-up attackers. You can consider Himeko and Herta for a nice pure fiction duo, Himeko and Jade with Himeko as the debt collector, Himeko with Topaz and Numbi, as Topaz will be able to inflict proof of debt onto an enemy, and Himeko can take advantage of this to inflict more follow-up damage onto that enemy, as well as of course assisting with advancing forward Numbi, Himeko with Haunt March 7th with Himeko as the Shifu, as Himeko can attack frequently, plus March will be able to also buff Himeko. Himeko can even be used alongside Fei Xiao, as Fei Xiao can benefit from Himeko's follow-ups for her Flying Aureus stacks, and Himeko can benefit from Fei Xiao being able to reduce enemy toughness meters regardless of what they may be weak to with her ultimate. And for Super Break dual DPS teams, you can use Himeko alongside Rappa, Firefly, and so on. Himeko has a lot of possibilities when it comes to who she can be used alongside for a dual DPS synergy, and taking advantage of a team-wide buffer will be a very nice consideration, as the buffer can assist with not only buffing up Himeko, but also buffing the secondary DPS of the team. One of the best options will be Robin for this role, but you can also consider Ruan Mei, Harmony Trailblazer if it's a dual DPS Super Break team, and so on. Now when it comes to the Super Break Himeko team, this would be your usual break team, consisting of main damage dealer, in this case Himeko, alongside Harmony Trailblazer, ideally Ruan Mei, but if you don't have her, then you can potentially consider an option like Pela or Asta if you're looking for a more budget-friendly option, and then a sustain of either Gallagher or Lingsha will be good. Harmony Trailblazer will enable super breaks for the team, Ruan Mei will provide weakness breaking efficiency, speed, and much more valuable buffs, while Lingsha and Gallagher can nicely keep the team alive as well as assist with breaking fire weak enemies, which now of course allows Himeko to unleash more frequent follow-up attacks. And they both can debuff enemies to make them take increased break damage, which would be the Besotted debuff from Gallagher and the Befog debuff from Lingsha. Now, an additional synergy worth mentioning will actually be Fugue and Himeko. I did actually recently put out a Fugue guide, so do make sure to check that out if you haven't already after this video. But in the case of Fugue and Himeko, Fugue will enable Himeko to reduce enemy toughness meters regardless of what they may be weak to. This will only be 50% though of the original toughness reduction. However, this will still be useful for Himeko to gain more charges to unleash more frequent follow-up attacks. Fugue also enables Super Break for the team by simply being on the field through her talent, as well as inflicts enemies with Cloud Flame Luster, which now makes them have an Exo Toughness meter. And this means you can now break enemies twice. which now means Himeko can heavily take advantage of this in order to unleash more follow-up attacks onto enemies. Overall, Himeko and Fugue will have a very nice synergy and will be a very great option for super break-oriented Himeko teams. Now that we've gone over Himeko team possibilities when it comes to just what characters can nicely synergize with her, as well as giving you an idea of the different archetypes she could potentially fit into, let's actually go over how to build Himeko. Also, side note, I need to check by the end of the video how many times I've said Himeko throughout this video, because I feel like I've said her name so many times at this point. But carrying on, when it comes to Himeko's main relics, one of her best sets will be Ash Blazing Grand Duke, as this will increase her follow-up damage as well as nicely increase her attack when she attacks enemies with her follow-up attacks. You can also consider 4-piece Pioneer, especially if you have good uptime on this set. When it comes to alternative sets, you can consider the 2-piece Duke set, as well as a 2-piece set that increases her attack, crit rate in the case of Scholar Lost and Erudition, and if you have a debuffer on the team, then of course Pioneer can be a nice consideration as well for your other 2-piece set. Now, as for super break-oriented Himeko, you can consider the Iron Cavalry set as well, and when it comes to her planar sets, you'll want to use Sigonia if you're primarily using her in Pure Fiction. Duron Dynasty is a good choice, and Nertzel Sato, and also Ruan Arena are nice considerations. And for a dual DPS team with 2 Erudition characters, you can also consider Izumo. As for Break Himeko, you can consider the Forge set for the additional break effect and speed, or the Talia set for the additional break effect. For main stats, you'll want to go with crit rate body. Alternatively, you can use a crit damage body if you have a lot of crit rate substats. You can use speed or attack boots, fire damage or attack orb, and lastly, attack rope. For substats, you'll want to focus on crit rate, crit damage, speed, and then of course you can also consider attack. Now, if you are using Break Himeko, you'll want to use speed boots as well as a break effect rope. For substats similar to the crit build, you can nicely take advantage of break effect subsets as well. And if you end up using the Iron Break set, then you'll want to try to ensure you have 250% break effect or higher in battle. And if you use Talia, you'll want 145 speed or above in battle as well. As for Himeko's light cone choices, there are a lot of options you can consider, which would include Yet Hope is Priceless Before Dawn, Night on the Milky Way for Pure Fiction, Genius's Repose, Eternal Calculus for Pure Fiction, Today's Another Peaceful Day, The Day the Cosmos Fell, The Seriousness of Breakfast. And for break-oriented builds, you can consider After the Charmony Fall and Ninjutsu Inscription. With Ninjutsu Inscription though, you'll want to keep in mind of the basic attack being utilized for the advance forward with the light cone, but overall the light cone has a very nice break effect stat stick that you could take advantage of, as well as of course the additional energy upon entering battle is very useful as well. Also, for the light cones I mentioned that are primarily really good in Pure Fiction, if there is an MOC where there are multiple mob enemies, so like there's maybe 4 or 5 enemies on the field and you can have high uptime on those light cones as well, of course be utilized very nicely in Memory of Chaos as well. It just ultimately comes down to how many enemies are on the field, since some Erudition light cones do have that condition where it's dependent on how many enemies are on the field, or even just how many enemies you attack. Ultimately though, Himeko has quite a lot of options when it comes to build variations, team synergies, and much more, especially as time went on, because it felt like every few patches there would be a new character or team in general that she can fit very nicely on or just very nicely with. And I'd love to know which teams you play your Himeko on and what team recommendations you have for those who have Himeko, or just fun teams in general you use with her. That'll be all though for today's video, and I will be releasing Fugue early access videos very soon. So do stay tuned for that. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, do make sure to subscribe, leave a like to support the video, and I hope you all have a great one like always. Peace.